Great. How are you?
I'm great. Well, today I'm talking with Rocky Dimico. Is that right?
That's
Is
right.
that, is my Southern accent getting that correct?
It is.
And you are the owner of Flights and Fables Travel Agency.
That is correct.
And are you located in Washington State?
No, I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. Something I was looking at, it looked like you might be in Washington, but now you have moved your location. You're in North Carolina. Well, great. That's great. And your niche, you specialize in fantasy travel, Europe, and New Zealand. And we're going to talk about that and get an explanation about fantasy travel is real travel. It's not just in your mind. We're going to get a explanation, a definition of that. But before I do, um, tell me how you got started in the travel business.
Well, it's all kind of tied together, the fantasy travel, how I got started. But growing up in a military family, we moved all over the world. I spent time, a couple years in Yemen while my dad was in charge of the embassy, a couple years in Finland.
Hmm.
Um, moving out throughout the country. And then eventually I decided to join the army and I decided to go ahead and move all over the country and all over the world. And so that kind of really started, from an early age with my parents moving me around and doing it myself and taking my kids and family with me everywhere we go. It really cultured a sense of travel and my passion for wanting to see new places, new cultures. And so it was, a little while ago, I was like, I need to find a way to get more into the travel. I want to be able to like be more involved in travel. How do I do this? And I was in New Zealand in 2022. And
Hmm.
that's when it kind of dawned on me. I want to be involved in travel and I want to figure out a way to do this for a living. And I had a friend of mine who had a travel agency and they started giving me advice. And so I took their advice
Hmm.
and it started pairing with my, love of travel. And I said, this is what I've got to do for a living. And so I started researching and that's how it kind of all came to fruition.
Okay. And how did you decide to join the Travel Quest network?
So I was taking the host agency reviews, kind of initial course where they get you involved in,
Hmm.
learning everything there is about the travel industry, and they put you through that kind of, couple, weeks of understanding, and then you go through a checklist, and through the checklist you're comparing other host agencies. And
Hmm.
as I was going through, it said, what are the things that you value the most?
Hmm.
And as I looked at the different host agencies that I was considering, Travel Quest Network checked all the boxes I needed
Oh,
with
okay.
training,
Hmm.
commission, support,
Hmm.
and then the interview kind of sealed the deal. So able to have the interviews with the three companies I narrowed it down to, the agencies I narrowed it down to. And in the end, Travel Quest was kind of heads above everyone else. And I was like, this is the one I'm going to go with. And this is the one I'm gonna put myself into.
Well, that is, I think that's awesome. It's great, and we had a meeting last month because you're a new member, and we kind of talked about things that are going on. And when I found out what your niche is and what you specialize in, I thought I'm going to have him in a conversation pretty soon, because I did a little of this type of travel through the years, and it's I think it's difficult. You have to really know your product when you get this detailed about the itinerary. So tell me, if someone wants to do a trip that specializes in fantasy travel, that's a real trip, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Define that.
So when I grew up, I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Huge
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings fan. I have the second edition ever printed. So the movies were getting ready to come out. And this was, years and years and years ago. I was, young and in the army. And I remember waiting for the midnight showing of Fellowship of the Ring.
Mhm.
And I went in and I saw the movie and I was just blown away. I was like, where is this place? Where did they film this? And when I found out it was New Zealand, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to go to New Zealand. And it went to the top of my bucket list. Now, obviously, I didn't make it till 2022. So it took quite a few years.
Yeah.
Um, but throughout my time, all the things that I'm passionate about with fantasy, I was able to kind of see just through happenstance. I was able to go and see um, Harry Potter studios. I went a couple of times to Harry Potter studios in London.
London.
I've been to Croatia to where Game of Thrones was filmed in King's Landing down there in Dubrovnik. I've been to Romania and seen, I didn't just go to Romania just to go to Romania. I went and kind of followed in Vlad the Impaler, Dracula's footsteps, going through all the castles in Germany and in, the Fairy Tale Road there in Bavaria. So you kind of just start realizing like all these passions that I had about fantasy, Vikings, and things like this. I was like, this is kind of a thing. This is what I want people to be able to experience is
Yes.
fantasy travel. It was just kind of, for lack of a better term, it's just the one I kind of latched onto. And it sounds weird. And I know some people probably are like, what is fantasy travel? But that's, we're coming in with a website and doing all the other things are going to be to kind of explain it to them and then getting into the marketing of it. But so far, people have been very interested in learning more about it. From someone I talked to just a couple of weeks ago to going to Romania, they wanted to go to Romania and see Vlad the Impaler, Neuschwanstein and the castles. There's a whole world out there that I think we haven't even tapped into. And I think eventually, as I expand, I think I really want to go into some other fantasy as I can get my hands on it. Machu Picchu and things like this, and places that I haven't even thought of yet, where we start diving into those deeper fantasy type cultures.
And I think it's very lucky and great that these fantasy travel trips that people want are in spectacular settings, beautiful countries. So it kind of works in your favor. If you have a family where the parents have always wanted to go to New Zealand and they're going to take their children, the kids are going to be really interested in Lord of the Rings and the different sites. But then you can also offer sightseeing for the parents.
Yes.
So it works really in your favor. Same thing about the London and Harry Potter and where the Game of Thrones was filmed. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And
you have the opportunity to kind of, I think, tack on things to trips to kind of, because I think one thing I was able to do with my kids when we traveled is you have to strike up a good balance of seeing the things that you want to see as a parent. And sometimes, children or, even your spouse, significant other might not know what's out there until they go and experience it for themselves. And I think by having some of these locations and having some of these places, you can kind of showcase to people like, yes, New Zealand, for example, you can go and do, Hobbiton up on the North Island, but then you can still go down to the South Island, see the spectacular scenery. But also if you're going wintertime, you can do skiing. If you go in summertime, there's all the beaches. I mean, there's so much to kind of tie into everybody getting a little thing of it. Like, London with Harry Potter. Maybe not everybody wants to go see Harry Potter. Maybe, one of the parents isn't a huge fan of it, but London, as we all know, or most of us know, has a wealth of things to go see that will definitely quell everyone's desire, whether it's shopping, museums, whatever it might be.
Yeah, true. So when you're putting together an itinerary and you've got let's say a family, is it difficult to tap up this hour or put together this itinerary where you're pointing out the scenes or the scenery or the important things to visit that don't have anything to do with the fantasy, but also including is it all put together in one itinerary, or do you do one for the people interested and one for the people not interested? How do you do that?
So I have a little database that I've created that kind of has what I would consider Lord of the Rings style things, and it has a plethora. And then it kind of goes to, so I'll use New Zealand as an example. It depends on how many days someone wants to spend. They say, hey, we want to take 2 weeks. And I said, okay, how much of this do you want to be Lord of the Rings? How much of this do you want to see? What does your budget look like? Because you can get deep and all into it and have the boat rides that are from the Hobbit that go down, on the South Island, on the north part of the South Island. You can go and see the safaris that take you through all the spectacular scenery. And those can be a half day or a full day.
Yeah.
But then you also have to talk people into like, not missing out on some of those UNESCO World Heritage sites that are also down there, like Milford Sound, Doubtful Sound,
Yes. Mhm.
Christchurch, just in general, or any number of places that you'd want them to go see. So it's
Mhm.
kind of that thing that we do so well as travel agents, which is kind of talking to that client, getting the feel for what they want. Are they diehard Lord of the Rings fans and all they want to see is all Lord of the Rings all day, or we
Yeah.
want to see Hobbiton and we want to see a couple things, but we also want to see, if we're going to be in New Zealand, we want to do these other experiences. So from then you just kind of pull from the database and kind of put in there and say, okay, how does this look? And then we kind of work on that together and see what they think.
This sounds very custom and very personal, and I think this is great. And it's a new direction, I think, for travel. Instead of just sending someone on the regular itineraries that you see all the bus tours do, this is more geared to what they're interested in. So
Yeah. And I think that's where the niche, lies. And
mm,
it's even a new way of marketing. So when you're reading about marketing with travel agencies, you're hearing about wedding shows and different types of places to go and get your customers. I find myself in comic book stores and in bookstores
yeah,
and
yeah.
movie stores,
Hmm.
marketing to that crowd, Dungeons and Dragons fans. Um,
Yes.
my this year is hopefully a big year if we can get accepted into some comic cons. That's
Oh,
exactly where we want to go, to these fantasy and sci-fi conventions that are going to be in the
uh-huh,
areas around us.
uh-huh.
That's one of the areas we're going, not your typical travel agent market. So we're going about it by going through these different markets, understanding who our clients are, and
Mm.
at the same time having that other part left for people who are interested in Europe and New Zealand as well.
Yes, yes. And believe it or not, I used to be a real sci-fi fan and have been to many, many conventions all over. And when you meet some really diehard fans that are really interested in a particular subject, such as yours, they want to know about it. They already know probably more than you do. So you really have to be on your game. You really do.
100%.
Yes. So I was looking at your website. I love it. You have a great website. It's called flightsandfables.com. Is that
Mhm.
correct? Okay. And I was looking at it. I noticed that you offer a free 45-minute consultation. And I think that's super because that kind of gives you the opportunity to find out if you're all on the same page, if they are thinking that you offer what you do, and you get an idea if they know what they want. And then you have a very set fee schedule. And I admire this. I think this is so great because there's just, it's right there. There's no doubt. And did you come up with all that, or did you get that idea from maybe some other agents?
It was kind of a combination. So obviously, I started this back a few months ago, and I didn't really kind of launch until November, is when I kind of started really saying, "Hey, everybody, we're open for business."
Mhm,
But in that time, there was a lot of research done, a lot of podcasts, a lot of
mhm,
marketing training, a lot of things,
mhm,
and the one thing I kept hearing was service fees, charging planning fees. And as I was typing them and kind of going through, how do I want to do this?
mhm.
I said, well, what is my time worth for people who are going to want to commit to this?
Yeah.
And I said, a 7-day itinerary, this is what I would say is pretty normal,
Mhm,
and I'm going to charge this fee. If we
mhm,
start getting into 14, you're going to start having to get into some intricate details. So up to 14 days, we do charge a different fee.
true.
And then up to 21 days, a little bit more. And then I tell people, if you're looking to go longer than 21 days, I'm going to probably put some time aside to devote to your itinerary, to devote to that
Mhm.
customization, because I want to give that first class service to that individual. I
Yeah.
don't want to be just churning out trips for people. If a person's willing to take the time with me to book for 21 days or more, 14 days to 21 days, I
Mhm.
want to make sure that I carve out time in my schedule to devote to that person's itinerary. So comparable, I want to have those little bit of fees to say, hey, I'm going to have to possibly, carve out some time for you. So let me make sure that we set this time aside in these fees for, the planning fees.
And in a way, setting it so clearly, it also kind of puts your customer at ease when they think, I have a lot of weird little things I want him to put in here. And they might think, well, that's a lot of work, but you've outlined it. So if that's what they want and they want to pay for it, you're happy to provide that for them. And that was what impressed me about your website. It's very clear. There's no doubt, and it kind of puts the customer, when they're looking at it, at ease about what they can ask for and what you will provide for them. I really love that a lot. A lot of times when I look at the websites, it'll just say, I charge a fee of whatever, and you don't know what you're getting for that, but you've got it. It's pretty clear. If anyone's out there is wondering about fees, this is probably a good example of how to kind of list this and break it out. And I loved where if it's an epic trip or a large group, you just said, let's discuss.
If someone comes to you and says, hey, we've got 12 people who want to go, I know I've got a big one coming up here in 2025 that I'm getting ready to work on, and they want to do a Viking style expedition up in Norway, chase some heritage, and they want a group. And that's going to take some work and that's going to take some time. But again, you want to have, you don't want to quote out that yet. You say, hey, let's talk about how many people and what that's going to cost, and then let's go. But you don't want to turn them off. You want to make sure that you're able to kind of say, let's talk about it. Let's see what's realistic, and let's see what's, what we'll be able to come up with. And I think the fees are in line with what everyone else does for the most part. And, you see all the surveys that come out about what does most people charge. And I think I'm pretty much in line with everybody else.
I think so. Although I think that yours is just laid out in a very clear way, which is, I think, it's very impressive to me how you did that. And also, if you've got a large group, sometimes you don't necessarily need to charge a large fee if you're going to have 100 people doing all the same thing. You need maybe an upfront fee to get it going, and which could be split out between people. So it's a good thing to just discuss it, see where they're at, and get an idea. Another thing I liked about your website, and I don't know if I even mentioned this because people probably will go there and just use it as a reference material or a tool, but you have great links on your website. Very important links that are so helpful when you're traveling. And did you kind of, now I've never seen a website that had this many clear and valuable links all in one place. So did you kind of compile this from different websites, or just decided this is the way to go?
It was, again, going through people, kind of, going through other travel agents' websites and kind of getting ideas, and then kind of thinking back to myself of like, when I was traveling, what were some websites I consistently go to? What are some places, currency, converters, and, what is the current threat level in certain countries? I come from a military background. And so, of course, a lot of times when we travel, we have to be very aware of what's going on in certain countries. And so I still constantly, to this day, if I'm thinking about going someplace, I had an idea of a place I wanted to go, and I looked at the State Department's threat level, and I was like, probably not a good idea at this moment. But I wanted to make sure that people had these links, and not just for the people who are booking with me, but I want people to realize that I'm an asset to them, even if they maybe don't decide to go with me at this moment for this one particular trip. They can go use my stuff and then say, Rocky had a lot of great tools and tips on his website.
Yeah.
He thinks about us. Maybe I'll book with him on my next trip. And so, it's that whole conversation about being the travel agent, travel advisor, travel consultant. What are we doing? That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to go with, is making sure that I might not book everyone. I might not be able to book everyone. I might not be the person for everyone. But if I can still provide tools, maybe the next time, or maybe they'll refer a friend to come and check out my website, and maybe that'll help.
True. That is an awesome idea, because if they come back and keep referring to your website for different questions they need answered, they're going to see something eventually that just they're going to want to do. You've got some itineraries kind of listed there, and you've got travel information. And I saw you already have, I know that you said you're pretty new at this, but you already have some testimonials from customers about, a great trip that you've planned for them. So anyway, it's a great website. And it leads me to wonder, because you obviously know a lot about the areas that you are promoting. Are you thinking about putting together a travel with me type group where you will escort and take the group yourself?
100%. That is, it's the baby steps. It's kind of getting the marketing started and going with the local. So our plan here is local marketing, the ones that are kind of not going to be too cost prohibitive, and then move up to hopefully the larger conventions in the future. Some of the more national ones with what we make from the first couple of years. But the eventual goal is to start putting together trips to places like, I think I mentioned Machu Picchu. That's one of the big ones, I think, because it still lends itself. There's a lot of kind of mystical, mysterious, kind of historical places that are down there. Lead a group down there. Eventually, maybe going into Japan, China, Thailand, Vietnam. These are areas that we're kind of thinking about
Yes.
leading group expeditions into, and kind of doing that. So that's 100% the goal. That's, we said within 2 to 3 years, that would be our goal, is to lead our first group adventure into some place. But again, we want it tied in with the fantasy. We don't want to leave our niche behind or leave our people behind.
Right.
We want to kind of say, hey, we're going to explore this. We're going to find these new fantasy locations, and why don't you come with us and experience it? And that's kind of what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, I think you're set up for this, and I predict that I'm going to see a group on your website probably in a year or so. I think so. Well, Rocky, I really enjoyed talking with you today, and I think you'll probably get some interest in people, in our members and other people looking at your website and possibly reaching out to you. But I I'm excited about your niche, and I'm going to be watching to see where you're going with this.
Well, thank you. We're excited too.
All right. Well, you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.